Hey guys, welcome back to the channel, and today we're going to be reacting to
Can Australia and the UK trust the US with AUKUS?
you're not going to say AUKUS?
AUKUS? AUKUS?
AUKUS?
AUKUS.
The AUKUS alliance was supposed to be the future of Western defense cooperation. Australia, the United Kingdom, and the United States working together to counter growing threats in the Indo-Pacific. Nuclear submarines, advanced cyber technologies, quantum capabilities, the works. But now, that future
I think they can, though. I think there's, a lot of anti-American sentiment, and I get it with everything Trump is doing right now, but this is all temporary, and to be fair, Trump kind of cooled off with his rhetoric a little bit. I think, like, he came off real hard in the first 100 days. I feel like the past, I want to say almost a month, been pretty quiet on all the fronts. There wasn't, like, considering how much was happening in the first 60 days of his term, the last month has been really the only things that we've heard, like, and we react in the past couple of weeks, is that, oh, the deals have been struck with the UK and the China, you know.
looks a lot less certain. I'm Tuomas, a former officer in the Finnish Defence Forces, and today we're going to talk about how President Trump's current behaviour and extreme delays in the US production of Australian submarines could effectively cripple or even end the AUKUS pact, and why Australia, the UK, and frankly the entire Commonwealth should be thinking very carefully about how much they can trust American leadership moving forward. When AUKUS was announced in 2021, it was heralded as a groundbreaking shift in Western defence cooperation. Australia would get nuclear-powered submarines, the UK would play a key industrial and training role, and the US would provide critical technology transfer. Australia had already been in discussions with France about acquiring submarines, but
Biden pulled out his shades.
He looks cool.
That's funny.
went with the American option for various reasons, with likely the largest one being pressure from the US. It was sold as a forever partnership, a move to strengthen the alliance network and create real deterrence in the Indo-Pacific against an increasingly aggressive China. The idea was simple: deep military integration among three trusted partners. The reality now is far more complicated. What made AUKUS different from traditional alliances was the depth of technological cooperation it promised. Nuclear propulsion is one of the most guarded technologies in the world, second only to nuclear weapons themselves. Sharing it with Australia was a bold move, a signal that trust was absolute. And to be frank, few other nations have cooperated and, as we've covered in our video on what America's wars cost Europe, followed the US lead as heavily as the UK and Australia.
Oh, yes, yes.
AUKUS comprises two main pillars. Pillar 1 focuses on Australia's acquisition of conventionally armed, nuclear-powered submarines, including the purchase of Virginia-class submarines from the US and the construction of AUKUS submarines in collaboration with the UK. Pillar 2 focuses on the joint development of advanced capabilities, including cyber technologies, artificial intelligence, quantum computing, and undersea capabilities. Despite its strategic intentions, AUKUS has faced substantial criticism within Australia. Prominent figures like former Labor Prime Minister Paul Keating labelled AUKUS the worst deal in all history, arguing it compromises Australia's sovereignty. Former Liberal Prime Minister Malcolm Turnbull also criticised the deal as one-sided in favour of the US. A lot of this criticism comes from the fact that the US seems to struggle to backfill its own submarine orders, so why would it delay its own programs to supply Australia? While supply lines and timeframes are important, the real thorn in the side of the AUKUS deal is likely the political instability the US offers to its partners. President Trump has made it abundantly clear that he sees alliances as transactional. NATO? He still questions its value. US commitments abroad? Only valuable if someone pays up. Today, as we discussed in last week's video, which I'll leave in the description, comments and the top right corner, under his leadership, he is sending all the wrong signals to his allies, publicly berating leaders like President Zelensky during official meetings, flirting with isolationism, openly questioning the value of traditional allies while cozying up to authoritarian figures. Don't take it from me. Let's see what the man himself knows about AUKUS, a supposed forever partnership.
The Brits will be discussing AUKUS with the Prime Minister, sir.
What does that mean?
AUKUS, the Australia-US Defence Alliance.
If this was a car salesman,
Ooh.
rather than someone trying to sell you billions of dollars worth of submarines, would you feel confident when he doesn't even know what it is? If you're in Canberra or London right now, you'd have to be wondering, can we actually rely on the US under President Trump?
But they know he wasn't a part of it, but I think if they're asking him these questions, he shouldn't just, like, respond this way. I wonder how long AUKUS was supposed to last, given that, Biden was on his way out. Well, he wasn't getting his second term.
Yeah, this, I mean, on one hand, he does have like the chambers who deal with that stuff. Not everything is him. On this other hand, though, he is kind of like the commander-in-chief of military, so I feel like when it comes to military, he kind of should be very well versed. Like we can kind of forgive the lapses in like economical understanding, social understanding, educational understanding, because that's what he has the advisors for. But yeah, when it comes to like military stuff, that's like literally the title is commander-in-chief of the military, so he kind of should know what it is.
To deliver on AUKUS commitments. Because here's the uncomfortable truth. AUKUS relies on American political stability, on continuity of policy, and Trump is a disruptor, not a builder. Adding to the tension, both Australia and the United Kingdom recently delivered landslide victories to their sitting prime ministers, Anthony Albanese and Keir Starmer, both coming from the centre-left party, Labour. Both leaders campaigned on platforms of strengthening alliances, respecting and
It's funny, both are Labour but spelled differently.
aiding allies, and rejecting the nationalist, isolationist impulses that define Trump's America First politics. This political divergence underscores a growing ideological rift within AUKUS itself. Two of the three partners are moving towards stronger international cooperation, while the third, under President Trump, appears increasingly inward-focused and transactional. Now, let's talk logistics.
So they need
AUKUS isn't just about nice speeches and handshakes. It's about complex, decades-long projects. Australia's first nuclear submarines aren't expected until the 2030s. Tech transfer agreements, industrial partnerships, training pipelines, all of it requires
This is
consistent political
impressive.
support.
It is.
Australia and the UK are likely bearing in mind that Trump's administration has already imposed new tariffs on all imports, including from close allies like themselves, which threatens to drive up submarine construction costs significantly. He could freeze technology transfers, using them as bargaining chips in unrelated trade or political disputes. He could demand payment from Australia beyond agreed terms, framing the partnership as unfair to American taxpayers, akin to what he's done with Canada. And don't think Congress would necessarily stop him. AUKUS already faces skepticism among some US lawmakers worried about giving away sensitive tech. With Trump's encouragement, that skepticism could turn into outright hostility. Adding to the uncertainty, the US Navy
That's so interesting how here we see like Americans saying lose-lose, but then also we see on the Australian side they're saying, oh, it's also kind of like lose for us too. We're not really gaining anything. We're just giving up our military control to America. Like that's so there's both parties, and by signing it, both parties, it's just like, oh, it's just a lose-lose scenario.
Navy itself is struggling to meet its own shipbuilding needs. The Virginia-class submarine program, critical to AUKUS interim deliveries, is facing delays of up to 3 years due to supply chain issues, labour shortages, and overburdened shipyards. Australia's plan to acquire 3 Virginia-class submarines from the US as a stopgap could be jeopardised, with deliveries likely pushed well into the late 2030s. Australia is investing billions into US industrial capacity to help address these problems, but it's far from guaranteed that the timelines will be met, especially under a volatile political environment.
That's so
Australia is not
interesting.
just a
Wow.
minor partner in the Indo-Pacific, it is a crucial ally. Geographically, Australia sits at a vital crossroads for maritime routes, energy shipping lanes, and power projection into Southeast Asia and beyond. Its ability to host US forces, provide early warning intelligence, and contribute capable submarines and air power is central to any realistic plan to deter or counter Chinese aggression. Without a strong, well-equipped Australia, American strategic depth in the Pacific shrinks dramatically. The United Kingdom too plays a more important role than many realize. Despite budget cuts and political turmoil, the Royal Navy remains one of the most capable blue water navies in the world. The UK's 2 aircraft carriers, the Queen Elizabeth and the Prince
we
of
see
Wales,
it, but it's very massive. Those ships.
Yeah, when they were like putting together the submarine in this warehouse, you can see like the human moving.
Yeah.
The human is like an ant
wow,
next to that
wow,
ship. Yeah,
wow.
it's the
That's
size of
crazy.
them is ridiculous.
combined
Like you see people on top of that ship. Look how tiny those humans are.
with nuclear attack submarines
It's
and a
like
global
ants.
basing
Yeah,
network,
look at this.
would be critical assets in any potential
And then to
confrontation with
land a
China.
plane on this too.
It is
Wow.
still the 4th largest navy in the world, and the US would be fools to alienate their closest ally throughout history. While hindsight is always clear, UK's pivot to 2 large aircraft carriers who have had their fair share of issues and budget overruns might not have been the best idea now that Europe seems to be the focus moving forward, with Britain playing a key role in the so-called coalition of the willing and standing up to Russia. But the Royal Navy will likely be instrumental for supporting the Nordics and European colonies should a conflict arise. AUKUS depends on one thing above all: trust. The trust that sensitive information will be safeguarded that promises will be kept, and that decisions won't be made on a whim. I've had the privilege of serving
Yikes.
alongside Australian and British troops in Afghanistan, and you'll struggle to find more professional, grounded, and genuinely good people anywhere. So when figures like J.D. Vance start dismissing the sacrifices of US allies as irrelevant, you can't help but wonder, what's next for this administration? But President Trump has shown time and again that he views alliances not as sacred obligations, but as tools to be leveraged or discarded. When you have a leader who is willing to publicly humiliate allies, withhold critical support, and openly suggest abandoning treaties, you no longer have a stable foundation for something as sensitive as a shared nuclear submarine program. Safe to say, I would not bet my own nation's security on that. Australia's entire future naval strategy is now tied to AUKUS. Billions of dollars, years of planning, recruitment of thousands of specialized workers, construction of massive shipyard facilities, all contingent on American goodwill. Would you bet that future on a country who elected a man who brags about tearing up alliances and cozying up to dictators like Putin and Kim Jong-un? If you're Australia right now, you have two choices. One, keep walking forward on AUKUS as if everything is fine, and pray President Trump and future American presidents doesn't pull the rug out. Or two, start hedging. Australia should be urgently looking at expanding partnerships with Japan, South Korea, India, and European powers. Perhaps the first thing they should do is to get back in touch with France about submarines again. If not France, then Germany, Britain, Sweden, South Korea, or Japan. Australia already has a strong and
they have
proven defense
options.
sector, as demonstrated by their recent radar sales to Canada
Yeah, they have
and the
options,
impressive
so they should go where they feel that this trust is stronger.
Yeah,
That's what
the
I would do.
the anti-American
I'm not gonna.
sentiment
I'm not
is
gonna
just-
wait around.
Yeah, it's tough.
cheap yet highly effective cardboard drones supplied to Ukraine. There's no reason Australia couldn't manufacture its own equipment under license from any of the nations mentioned. Taking this path would significantly reduce its reliance on the shifting tides of US politics. Moreover, these alternative partners are generally
Wow,
far
that's
less
really
restrictive on
precise.
ETA regulations and much less prone to sudden political interference. The UK, for its part, needs to
That's really
recognize that
precise. I
relying
guess the
solely on
drone
US
was targeting that. Wow,
Yeah.
that's precise. That's scary.
goodwill, especially under President Trump, is not a serious strategy. And complicating matters even further for Australia, the UK's new Defence Secretary John Healey recently announced that Britain would refocus on NATO and European defence, potentially at the expense of Indo-Pacific ambitions like AUKUS.
I feel like the UK is safe though. Now that they kind of struck a deal with Trump, I think that Trump is will work with the UK. I think that's all he wanted, really, people to strike a deal with him. I think that honestly it's all about the deal with him. I think as long as people negotiate with him to make him feel like he's getting a bargain, I think that's what's gonna matter at the end of the day. He's just, it is what it is. He's very egotistical.
AUKUS is a symptom of a larger issue. The Western world still acts as if US leadership is guaranteed. It isn't. The Ukraine war showed us that European security is now at the mercy of internal US political battles. President Trump's actions, undermining allies, questioning defense treaties, blocking aid packages, have revealed that the era of automatic American leadership is over. It's not that the US isn't powerful, it's that its politics are too unstable for allies to depend on blindly. Security experts like Robert Potter are warning that President Trump could sideline Australia in broader US-China relations, preferring direct bilateral deals over traditional alliances. The danger here isn't just President Trump, it's the precedent. Future American leaders, Republican or Democrat, could now feel free to treat alliances as negotiable or expendable based on short-term political needs. If Australia, the UK, and the Commonwealth aren't planning for that contingency now, they're making a critical error.
What the Dutch
Can I? Oh, I cannot see the comments.
Yeah, hold up. Let me go back to the video.
The AUKUS alliance was
I recall back in the 90s, a US senator was asked about the UK and US special relationship. His reply, the US doesn't have any special relationship, just allies of convenience. I do wish our political parties would remember that as well. And is define something Australia should think about and ask Canada about how the special relationship with the US has turned out.
It's not looking good for the alliance.
If you're Australian, you might notice that I sound like an Australian with a potato in his mouth. That is because in the early 2000s, I spent 2 years working in Australia before I joined the Finnish Defence Forces. And so my sauna English is somewhat diluted. 2 years in Newcastle and Wollongong Best years of my life. Don't tell my wife. Ooh,
Oh.
she better not read the comment.
Guys, of course, let us know your thoughts. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Join the Discord. And as always, share as much kindness as possible. Bye, guys.